In the crook town of Hollowmere, where lamplight never quite reached the sea, there lived a man who painted the fog. His name was Ephraim Veil, a name whispered like a prayer or a curse. He lived in a house that leaned too far toward the cliffs, its windows perpetually misted with salt and sorrow. Every dawn, as the townsfolk shut their doors against the encroaching gray, Ephraim would step out. He carried his easel, his brushes, and a palette holding the colors of secrets. It was said the fog itself obeyed him. When his brush danced across the canvas, the mist would shift and bend, curling into the forms of forgotten faces, towering cathedrals, or birds with trembling wings. One time, he painted a cathedral from pure vapor and shadow. It was so hauntingly beautiful that sailors wept as their ships passed by it in the mist. Another time, he painted a woman pale, veiled, and so lifelike she seemed to be breathing. For 7 nights the fog refused to fade, holding her image suspended in the air. But no one in Hollowmere truly knew why he painted. Some said he was cursed, bound to the mists for some forgotten sin. Others whispered he had loved a ghost and was trying to paint her back into existence. The truth, as is often the case, was quieter and far more heartbreaking. Years ago, Ephraim had been the most sought-after portraitist among Hollowmere's nobility. He was a master of capturing their vanity in flawless, flattering light. But among all the faces he had painted, one haunted him still, Ilara, a musician with eyes the color of rain. He had painted her just a week before she was lost to the harbor, her final song stolen by the rising tide and the thick, unforgiving mist. And so he abandoned portraits of the living. Since that day he painted only the fog. Perhaps he hoped it might remember her for him. Perhaps if he painted it just right, he could pull her from its depths. Each night, when the moon was nothing more than a dull, tarnished coin in the sky, Ephraim would light his lantern and begin his work. His canvas would shimmer in the dim, ethereal glow, his hands trembling as if they too were fading into the haze. He mixed his paints with sea mist and candle soot, whispering to the fog as if it were an old, familiar friend who held the key to his past. Slowly, shapes would emerge from the canvas, the shadows of ghost ships, the outlines of forgotten streets, and pale, ethereal hands reaching out from the gloom. He was always searching, always hoping that one of those hands, one of those faces, would finally be hers. The townsfolk, however, gave his hill a wide berth. He trapped souls in his paintings, they would mutter to one another, pulling their collars tight. And the fog, it hungers for more. Sometimes, on the densest nights, they swore they saw faces in the mist that looked far too alive, eyes watching from beneath lampposts, lips mouthing words that were lost to the wind. Then came the night when Hollowmere's fog did not lift. It was a suffocating presence, creeping under doors and into the lungs of the sleeping, as thick and heavy as a final slumber. Lanterns sputtered and died, clocks stopped ticking. Even the ever-present gulls fell silent, their cries swallowed by the oppressive white. People stumbled blind through the streets, calling out for loved ones, but their voices vanished into the endless void. Only one person could see. For Ephraim Veil, the fog opened like a curtain. It revealed his own creations wandering through the silent town. These were the figures he had painted over the long, lonely years, the sailor with hollow eyes, the child clutching a cracked doll, the veiled woman who never drew a breath. And there, walking among them, was Ilara. She looked just as she did on the day he lost her, her dress trailing ribbons of mist. Her voice, when she spoke, was as soft as the foam on the shore. "You've painted me so many times," she said, her rain-colored eyes filled with a gentle sadness. "But you never finished the song." Ephraim fell to his knees, the weight of his grief finally crushing him. "I was trying to bring you back," he confessed, his voice breaking. "You cannot paint life from sorrow," she whispered, her form shimmering. "You can only remember it." Her hand, as cold and silver as moonlight, reached out and touched his cheek. "Let the fog go, Ephraim." "Let me go." He hesitated for a long, agonizing moment. Then, with a resolve he hadn't felt in years, he dipped his brush not into paint, but into the golden flame of his lantern. It hissed, smoking with a brilliant, warm light. With a single, trembling stroke, he painted a sunrise across his canvas. The fog shuddered. It thinned, it curled, and it broke apart like fine silk torn by a sudden wind. One by one, the ghostly figures he had created dissolved into the air. Their faces turned toward him in silent, smiling gratitude as they vanished. Ilara lingered last. She faded with a faint, resonant hum, the final, perfect note of her unfinished melody, now complete. When morning finally came, the people of Hollowmere awoke to a sky they hadn't seen in years. It was blue, fragile, and achingly beautiful. The sea glittered as if nothing had ever been lost to its depths. At the cliff's edge, Ephraim's easel stood alone. His brushes lay scattered on the ground, and his last canvas showed nothing but pure, radiant light. No one ever saw him again. But now, on misty mornings, when the fog drifts low over Hollowmere, the townsfolk sometimes glimpse shapes in the haze. They see lanterns, faces, and the silhouette of a man holding a brush that gleams like a blade of dawn. And if you listen very closely, beneath the cries of the gulls and the pull of the tide, you might just hear her song returning soft, unfinished, but now full of color. Because some fogs never vanish completely, they just hold memories. They remember.